A good suit can make you feel on top of the world. It can grant you some super strength, but it could also make you a lot angrier. Angry enough to do anything in your power to turn our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, Peter Parker, into minced meat. Well, if that suit is a Klyntarian symbiote, that is. On the Battleworld, the Beyonders sent Earth's heroes and villains to fight it out like insects in a 10-year-old's mayonnaise jar. But it turns out that the white jumpsuit with shoulder pads was only the second most problematic piece of clothing. Since that fateful meeting, the Venom Symbiote has gotten around, so let's take a look at some of its more reluctant temporary besties. Sometimes bad guys like to outsource. Mac Gargan is no stranger to being recruited. As a private investigator, he was recruited by J. Jonah Jameson to figure out how Peter Parker kept getting all those sweet Spider-Man pics. When that didn't work out, he recruited Gargan for an experiment that turned him into the spider's natural enemy. No, not a rolled-up newspaper, a scorpion. And according to National Geographic, scorpions hunt spiders. It all checks out. While being Norman Osborn's get-out-of-jail plan, another big-time Spider-Man hater approached him, but this time it was the Venom Symbiote. The symbiote was looking for a new ride, and Gargan had what he needed. Like all troubled relationships, it worked out in the beginning. Scorpion moved up to the villain big leagues and even found a spot on the Thunderbolts. Some relationships just can't survive an encounter with an ex, and when the Scorpion runs across Eddie Brock, it all starts to fall apart as Venom tries to bond with its old bestie. Only to encounter the anti-Venom secretly put in Brock by another Spider-Man hater, Negative Man. Man, the Spider-Man Haters Club gets around. Things get worse from there, and the symbiote tells Gargan that their relationship ends when he wants it to. If only Gargan had talked to Brock and Parker first. S.H.I.E.L.D. can be full of bad ideas. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they tried to use the Tesseract to create weapons and allowed Hydra to use them to build a threat-killing system. In the comics, they thought it might be a good idea to find a way to use the symbiote for their own purposes. For a host, they picked someone close to Spider-Man because, of course. This time, it was Peter Parker's former bully-turned-friend-turned-war vet, Flash Thomspon. When Flash loses his legs in the war, he's offered the symbiote to become Agent Venom. On the plus side, the symbiote gives him legs again. On the negative side, Thomspon isn't able to be with the symbiote for longer than 48 hours. Otherwise, the symbiote takes over, including his less-than-heroic tendencies, like trying to make Jack-o'-lantern eat a grenade. The job of Agent Venom eventually takes the pair into space where he meets the Guardians of the Galaxy and the other Klyntarians, eventually becoming Agent of the Cosmos. And to think, most people thought he'd peak at high school football. Eventually, Thomspon struggles with the symbiote's more violent nature, and another Venom X comes a-callin', so all questionable things must come to an end. Last year, moviegoers were introduced to the various incarnations of Spider-Man in the movie Into the Spider-Verse, featuring Miles Morales as Spider-Man and 3 other Peter Parkers, a Penny Parker and a Peter Porker. The thing is, that's only scratching the surface of all the different versions of Spider-Man there are. There's even a Japanese movie version that operates a giant robot. It's a whole thing. For the animated Ultimate Spider-Man, Venom got a new origin story. This time around, Dr. Octavius and Norman Osborn take some Spider-Man DNA to create the Venom Symbiote, since there wasn't a Secret Wars in the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series. When the symbiote goes looking for Spider-Man to get back to its roots, it eventually ends up bonding with Harry Osborne. It may be a different symbiote, but it's the same old story. Harry thinks he can control it, but eventually the symbiote starts to control him. Unfortunately, Harry's father isn't the kind to win Father of the Year, so even when Harry tries to get things under control, Norman goads him into becoming Venom again. It takes a blast of lightning and anti-venom to free Harry once and for all. The DNA-derived symbiote didn't just contain itself to one animated series. The Disney XD block of Ultimate Marvel programs included shows dedicated to other iconic Marvel characters. One of those shows was for the various Hulks. Oh, yeah, Spider-Man isn't the only one to have a bunch of different versions. This one features the Savage Hulk that we all know and love, his cousin Jennifer Walters, the She-Hulk, Red Hulk, Scar, and former Bruce Banner sidekick Rick Jones. Yep, Hulk used to have a sidekick. Together, they form the Supreme Military Agency of Superheroes, or SMASH, because it wouldn't be superheroes without acronyms. In the episode The Venom Inside, Doc Ock takes an opportunity to send his Venom goo after the agents of SMASH, hoping to gather their gamma radiation to form Gamma Venom. With the 5 Hulks gamma radiation and Hulk inside, the irradiated Gamma Venom starts to bubble. It turns out that it was Doc Ock's plan to cause the Gamma Venom to explode and create an island of Venoms. Unfortunately for agents of SMASH, this isn't a smashing problem. They end up resolving it old school by grabbing a large church bell and collectively punching it, reminiscent of how Spider-Man originally rid himself of the symbiote. In the new Venom comic, Eddie Brock is getting to learn more about the symbiote he can't seem to quit, including the fact that he and Parker aren't the first Earthlings to bond with symbiotes. It turns out that the idea to weaponize Venom for Agent Venom wasn't the first time they explored the super bad idea to try and use the symbiotes. Brock encounters a man with a super comic book name, Rex Strickland. Strickland, it turns out, was part of a secret movement to recreate the super soldier serum. 4 symbiotes are sent to Vietnam, where predictably it all goes wrong. To stop them, Nick Fury sends in the scariest thing he knows: Wolverine. What Nick doesn't know is that Klyntarians feed off of anger and adrenaline, so sending in Wolverine is like giving Popeye some spinach. Not only that, but Wolverine gets to see the unsavory methods the government used to make the symbiotes into weapons. And considering how well acquainted he is with government experiments, you could probably imagine how he felt about that. The symbiote also gets some of Wolverine's sense of purpose and speaks the first symbiote words, "not animals," saving Wolverine and the others from an explosion. In 2021, Disney Plus subscribers will be introduced to the animated What If series from Marvel Studios. For the fans of the comics, the What If titles have been delivering alternate versions of popular Marvel characters, introduced by Uatu the Watcher for decades. If you're not familiar, the Watchers are the big-headed guy Stan Lee was talking to in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In one of those stories, Uatu looked in on the Beyonder in Earth 90211. The Beyonder has always had a bit of an 80s look with his wet perm and shoulder pads. Earth 90211 is all about the 80s. Seriously, what's up with those shoulder pads? In this reality, Deadpool is hired to kill the Beyonder because he has bonded MODOK to Galactus's hiney. Buckle in because it only gets weirder from there. The Beyonder separates the symbiote from a distraught Spider-Man and bonds it to Wade Wilson, and the pair party across the universe with a head of symbiote Jerry curls, because why not? Eventually, Venompool gets some counseling from Doc Samson to become his truest self. Unfortunately, his truest self is being a giant jerk. This ends with him taking his Beyonder-destroying device and erasing himself. If all these continuities are hard for you to keep track of, you're not alone. Over time, comic book lines became clogged with alternate realities and timelines, or main timelines get long in the tooth and hard to maintain. Or they wander so far from the origins of the character that the spirit of the original seems like a distant memory. It's hard to keep a character like Peter Parker a teenager or young man when he was created almost 60 years ago. To solve this problem, comic book companies tend to have a massive event where all these different timelines collide, resulting in old ones dying off and sometimes new ones being born. For Marvel, that cleaning house event was 2015's Secret Wars. Distinct from the Beyonder Secret Wars, where he just brought a whole bunch of heroes and villains to a planet to fight like refugee antagonists from a Star Trek episode, this one collided several realities. One of those was Earth 32323, where the civil war between Steve Rogers, finally promoted to General, and Tony Stark has gone on for way too long. To help move things along, Spider-Man gets help from Clint Barton, who managed to inherit the Venom Symbiote from Mac Gargan. Speaking of alternate timelines and what-ifs, sometimes a what-if story can become popular enough that it becomes its own story taking place in its own timeline, which is one of the ways things get so confusing. In the case of Gwen Stacy's Spider-Woman, or as she's more popularly known, Spider-Gwen, it's another member of the expansive Spider-Verse of alternate timeline Spider-Folk. Introduced to the Spider-Verse comics, she proved popular enough to get her own title. In Spider-Gwen's timeline, it's Stacy who gets bitten by a radioactive spider and becomes able to do whatever a spider can, while Peter eventually follows the Kurt Connors path, injecting himself with a formula turning him into a lizard so he can be special like Spider-Woman, who kills him while trying to stop his rampage. No matter who gets the spider bite, tragedy follows. Maybe that's a spider power too. It's a topsy-turvy world she lives in where the symbiote is a creation of Dr. Elsa Brock from the space spiders used to make the spider that gave her powers, and she's tricked into merging with it by a corrupt Matt Murdock in order to get her to kill Rhino in front of the police. You never want to be the third or fourth wheel in a bad relationship. With Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote's obsession with Peter Parker, it's easy to forget a fourth party in this love-hate affair, and that's Eddie Brock's wife, Anne Weying. Anne becomes aware that she's lost her husband to the world's worst bromance love-hate triangle, and being a lawyer, is more than a little aware of the nastiness her husband has gotten up to with his new hobby of hating Spider-Man. As a result, she helps Spider-Man learn about his new best enemy in the hopes that Spider-Man can stop Venom's destructive ways. She even trails Spider-Man to an amusement park to convince Eddie to give up his beef with the wall crawler. Unfortunately, this is a comic book, and nothing good happens at an amusement park in a comic book. She's shot by Sin Eater as part of his whole crusade, forcing Eddie to lend her the symbiote to save her life. We all know what happens next. Say it with us, it all goes bad. She lashes out at both Sin Eater and Brock until Brock is able to get the symbiote back. The story actually gets a little too dark for this video after that. While in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Carol Danvers went straight from Air Force test pilot to Kree soldier to Captain Marvel, her path in the comic books was a little longer to the red and blue. When she first got into the superheroing business, there was already a Captain Marvel, or Marvel. The rest of the story is more or less familiar. She gets too close to Marvel when a Kree device explodes, gets superpowers, and becomes Miss Marvel. Danvers takes part in the Siege storyline where Norman Osborn took over S.H.I.E.L.D., calling it Hammer, and is taking his evil Avengers on an assault against Asgard, which is 100 feet over Oklahoma. Yeah, things had gotten weird. The result is an all-hands-on-deck brawl that finds Miss Marvel teaming up with Spider-Man to fight a Venom-fused Scorpion. The pair manage to separate the symbiote for Gargan, but the symbiote knows a good thing when it sees it, and bonds with Miss Marvel, hoping to fly away. Thanks to Miss Marvel's half-Kree nature, she's able to break away given the Klyntarian's specific history with the Kree as a former experiment to give the Kree Skrull-like shape-shifting abilities. Remember how we talked about Agent Venom joining the Guardians of the Galaxy and making his way to Klyntar and reconnecting with the symbiote group consciousness? It sounds perfectly wonderful, like someone taking a nostalgic gap year trip to the homeland of their ancestors with some chill backpackers they met along the way. Except those backpackers are the Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's not a college student, but a war hero S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who bonded with an unstable alien symbiote with a murder streak a mile wide. At some point, Flash becomes separated from the symbiote. Now that he's back to being a regular guy, the Guardians decide to shuttle Flash back to Earth. In the process, however, the symbiote gets a hold of Groot, causing Rocket to leap into action and get taken over by the symbiote. This leads to Drax the Destroyer showing the symbiote how he got his nickname by slamming Rocket Venom into the wall and gets taken over by the symbiote. The Guardians are slow learners. It's Venom Drax who takes them to Klyntar where the symbiote creator Knull is held prisoner. The symbiotes then reset Venom and rebond him with Flash. The Civil War part of Battleworld isn't the only time that Hawkeye had a run-in with the symbiote. During the Old Man Logan storyline, Hawkeye had some old man adventures of his own. In the not-so-distant future of Old Man Logan, things have gotten pretty bad. Mysterio had managed to convince Wolverine that his teammates were in fact a massive group of supervillains as part of a coordinated effort on their part to take over the world. As a result, Logan slaughters his teammates. Because of that, he punishes himself in the worst way possible. He moves to Sacramento, California, to live out his days until a blind Hawkeye hires him to take a package east. During that trip, they encounter a number of weird foes and obstacles, including a Venusaurus Rex, a T-Rex from the Savage Lands that had been infested by the Venom Symbiote. It turns out that Hawkeye had lured the symbiote into the Savage Lands to be eaten after multiple men had bonded with it, making a small army of Venoms. Hawkeye had beaten the copies and hoped that getting a T-Rex to eat Venom would be the end of it. Apparently, he doesn't know Venom too well. Spider-Man has a complicated relationship with most of his villains when you get right down to it. Either they're his friends, dad, or a mentor gone wrong, or an alien being that bonded with him who's now obsessed with him. In the case of Otto Octavius, he's had a long relationship that's taken some weird turns. Like when he almost had to call him Uncle Otto. In an effort to top that weirdness, Doc Ock was able to take advantage of Peter tapping into his Octobot's hive mind to swap minds with Peter Parker, leaving Peter in Otto's dying body and Otto in Peter's do-whatever-a-spider-can body. When Peter fails to reverse the process, he instead lays all of his guilt and responsibility on Octavius instead, compelling him to become a good guy. But he's still Otto, so he thinks he'll do it better, becoming the superior Spider-Man. Egos. He encounters Agent Venom, but thinks it's regular Venom and manages to separate Flash from the symbiote and tries to keep it contained, which of course doesn't work. He then becomes Superior Venom and becomes even more brutal while trying to be a good guy until Octavius realizes that Venom is controlling things. By now, both movie and comic book fans are familiar with the lying liar who tells lies that is Quentin Beck. In the comics, Beck is a frustrated special effects artist who decides to stage a supervillain attack to pretend to be a hero, which of course goes all wrong and puts him in Spider-Man's extensive rogues gallery. As part of that prestigious rogues gallery, Beck went about looking for a way to get his revenge on Peter Parker for thwarting his various plans to get revenge on Peter Parker. It's a vicious circle. During the stories meant to cover the period of time between when Spider-Man got the Symbiote Suit and discovered that the Symbiote Suit meant no good, Mysterio managed to get a hold of a little bit of the suit and took it to Kingpin's tech guy, Jonathan Ohm, to see if it could give him an edge against the Wallcrawler. Has this worked for anyone? No, it hasn't. Once more, it all blows up in his face. While Beck is able to use the symbiote to escape the Kingpin and throw some shade on his nickname as the lead pin in bowling, when he decides to kill Spider-Man once and for all, it doesn't end as planned. Of course, at the gooey center of all this symbiote leapfrog is our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It all started innocently enough as a way to explain how a kid who can barely pay rent selling selfies to a local paper is also able to repair his costume after every fight. Taking a suggestion from a fan, they came up with a symbiote Peter found in a lab during the original Secret Wars. Eventually, Peter found himself acting more aggressively and even going out while he was asleep like it was superhero Ambien. The symbiote turned out to be part of a race of beings created by an ancient being who had a beef with the Celestials. So he cut the head off of one of them and brewed up a species of symbiotes in it before the head became nowhere. The Venom Symbiote had been experimented on by the Kree to get in on these Skrulls' shapeshifting, giving it too much empathy for the now sociopathic species, resulting in it finding itself on the Battleworld. While the Venom Symbiote has formed a soft spot for his second host, Eddie Brock, you never forget your first love, and Venom remains obsessed with Peter Parker, alternating between trying to kill him and clumsily trying to be like him. Well, those are some of the people who've ended up on the wrong end of the Venom symbiote, but it's only a partial list. That symbiote's gotten around. Who's your favorite symbiote host? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, why not subscribe to CBR to bond with our symbiote? And as always, thanks for watching.